Last year, we were told that these leaked specs were the specs of the long-awaited Canon EOS R6 Mark III. But then, a little bit later, we were told that these specifications were indeed the leaked specifications of the Canon EOS R6 Mark III. And today, well, we got a different list of leaked specifications that are for the R6 Mark III. Confused? Well, we'll dive into the red flags to give you a realistic look at what the R6 Mark III will actually deliver. If you're serious about staying ahead of the latest camera gear, hit that subscribe button. It helps this channel grow while keeping you in the loop. These were the first set of leaked specifications for the Canon EOS R6 Mark III. So high level that anybody could have forecast it. So it's more likely a forecast, something made up, than a leak. But then in December, we got these set of specifications. More depth, yes, but less breadth. And today, with a May rumored announcement, we got another set of supposed leaks. Did you spot the difference between the specs from August and December? We'll cover the leaked specifications for the Canon EOS R6 Mark III in 4 main chapters that you can find down below. The first chapter is all about the brains of the R6 Mark III, and that includes the sensor, to which there are many different leaks about different versions of the same resolution sensor, the image processor, as well as a potential AI processing unit. And then the next set of leaked specifications is going to cover, in the second chapter, photo capabilities, followed by video capabilities, and then the last chapter of leaked specifications will include, well, ports and ergonomics. So first up, the brains of the Canon EOS R6 Mark III. All sources are pointing towards a 24 megapixel sensor, full frame sensor, with 2 sets of specifications calling for the sensor to be the same one that's found in the Canon EOS R3, with today's specifications calling for a brand new sensor. Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that the R6 Mark III is going to get a resolution of 24 megapixels. Canon has kind of indicated that, yes, 24 megapixels is more than enough for certain groups, including those interested in purchasing the Canon EOS R6. Obviously, it's going to be a full frame sensor, and it's going to be stacked. And all this should give us a sensor that beats out Nikon's Z6 Mark III's partially stacked sensor. And all the leaked specifications, but the ones dated for August the 24th, call for a digic accelerator in the Canon EOS R6 Mark III. So a 24 megapixel stacked full frame sensor makes sense. Are we going to get the same one in the Canon EOS R3? Maybe updated for some efficiencies? Or are we getting a completely new sensor? I am going to touch on this one a little bit later on when we cover video specifications, but for now I think it's safe to say yes, 24 megapixels. And of course the the Digic X image processor. But what about an AI processing chip? Well, I think that one's pretty much a foregone conclusion. Sony was the leader in the space with the A7R5. Announced several years ago with the very first AI processing chip claiming to provide better than ever AI-enhanced autofocus capabilities. And then it took Canon a few years, but we finally got Canon's own digic accelerator and AI processing chip in the R5 Mark II and the Canon EOS R1. It really does help with the autofocus system. It's not that it makes the autofocus system really faster in terms of processing. What it does is it takes all those tasks and it deals with it itself, so it's able to dedicate itself to AI focusing, allowing it to be more responsive, but also when it comes to tracking of subjects and objects, it gives it a predictive analysis capability. So if you're tracking a basketball player, football player, soccer player, whatever it is, or even your son playing a game, it's seeing the trajectory of that subject, and focus is kind of predicting where it's going to go next to better accurately follow your subject. But now it's time to turn our attention to the photo capabilities, the leaked photo capabilities of the Canon EOS R6 Mark III. The August leaked specifications is the only set of specifications that actually calls for both the mechanical and electronic shooting modes, and this certainly seems likely. The Canon EOS R5 Mark II's electronic mode got a huge update thanks to the new brains behind the camera, allowing 30 frames per second and to be able to produce a much faster readout speed of 6.3 milliseconds. The improved readout speed, along with getting Canon's brand new autofocus system that we saw in the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, provides a much faster autofocus system that's more accurate with enhanced AI capabilities that are definitely going to provide a noticeable upgrade, allowing photographers to have a much higher hit rate. Getting the digic accelerator really isn't a surprise. It's something I predicted when the R5 Mark II came out. I can see Canon giving every single camera they come out with this chip. Maybe not the R100. And as far as the R50 Mark II, whenever it comes out, honestly, I'd be surprised if Canon doesn't put the chip in that camera as well. I mean, after all, Sony's been doing this for years. Is Canon going to allow Sony to get a leg up on them? I doubt so. But this one line does have me scratching my head. The R6 Mark III is supposed to have a highly reliable 14-bit, 30 frames per second raw electronic shutter continuous shooting, reading speed 1/180th of a second. I love how they like to use words such as highly reliable and then just jam in as many possible keywords as they possibly can. And I think what's going on here is they are trying to get clicks. I mean, if we break this down a little bit here, what's the highest shooting speed for the Canon EOS R6 Mark II? Yeah, it's 40 frames per second and it's raw. So the R6 Mark III is going to get a downgrade, still shoot raw, but at 30 frames per second with a new digic accelerator chip? It does seem highly suspect. And there are some other, what I would call, how should we say, cheesy capabilities. When the R5 Mark II came out, one thing it did away with was pixel shift. Now, it wasn't the best implementation of pixel shift. That award really goes to Sony, once again with the A7R5. But the Mark I still has pixel shift today. I'm shooting with that camera and it has pixel shift, which is really great for portrait food photography or product photography and food photography. Not so much, oh my God, I can't get the words out. It's great for product and food photography, not so much for portrait photography. I'm not going to cut this out. I'm going to keep going. Let's keep going. But the R5 Mark II, instead of getting that, Canon came out with a, how should we say, an AI, I don't know if the word upscaling is the right word for it. And it's pretty cheesy. A lot of people who've looked at it, Tony Northrup and his wife and many others, have said that if you look in close, it's just kind of a sea of pixels and so you lose wood grain, you lose other textures, and what's the point of making a file twice as big, increasing the resolution, but not giving you any extra information? So I don't use it. I just don't see the point to it. Canon, I really would like to see you bring back pixel shift on the R6 Mark III, on the R5 Mark II. Maybe it works for people that are looking at buying the R50, the R50V, the R10, the R7, but, well, maybe not so much the R7, but for professionals, we're not interested. And maybe this is an opportunity to say that even some applications like Topaz and others, and just bear with me here, this overuse of tools, I think sometimes goes a bit too far. One thing I like about photography and videography is capturing the world as it is. And yes, I love capturing birds without any noise. Sometimes that's just not possible. So we use denoisers. And it's fine to use denoisers, but when you go a bit too far where it starts to just completely change the image that you captured, well, it's less a photograph and more of an AI-generated image. So there are some gimmicky capabilities here, but in terms of 14-bit RAW, again, it's plausible. 30 frames per second doesn't make any sense when the R6 Mark II can do 40 frames per second. So again, that's why I say the likelihood of some of these specifications like this one here, well, it kind of puts it into doubt, doesn't it? I mean, 30 frames per second, it's definitely a downgrade. So maybe they got the sensor wrong. Maybe it isn't the R3 sensor because they are pretty precise there, including the part number of the sensor, LC1720. And anyone could suggest the R5 Mark II's autofocus system, that's a given. And we'll touch on some of these other specifications once we get to the video capabilities, the leaked video capabilities of the Canon EOS R6 Mark III. And one other thing before we leave this slide, the R6 Mark III gets an enhancement to IBIS, giving it 8.5 stops of stabilization. And again, we saw this same improvement to the R5 Mark II. So it's possible that the R6 Mark III is getting this too, or someone's just copying that capability from the R5 Mark II. After all, some of the capabilities of the R5 do trickle down to the R6. But as you can see, we're starting to see some of these specifications seem a little bit suspect. We're seeing red flags, and well, we've got a few more red flags to cover in the video specification. So without further ado, let's turn over to those right now. Many of the leaked video specifications for the R6 Mark III play it safe. They're all pretty well pointing to 6K up to 60 frames per second RAW. And with a resolution of 24 megapixels, of course, 6K up to 60 frames per second, although some say 6K up to 30 frames per second RAW and S35. But what's interesting is they don't really get into a lot of details about this. Now, we do believe that one of them did say it's going to have 6K oversample 4K, and we'd really be surprised if it doesn't do that. The R10 and the R7 do 6K oversample 4K, so a much higher camera is going to get it as well. Now, in terms of 4K video, well, it can do 4K video all the way up to 60 frames per second, but it can go higher than that to 100 and 120 frames per second. So that's really good. But in a way, if you take a look at these specifications, they're the exact same specifications that we currently see for the Nikon Z6 Mark III, which isn't a bad thing, but what it kind of indicates is that someone's just copying down the Nikon Z6 Mark III specifications, passing them off to get clicks, passing them off as R6 Mark III specs instead of Z6 Mark III specs. Now, one source has called for the R6 Mark III to get the exact same XF AVC-S and XF HEVC-S that we see in the R5 Mark II. So really good news, right? Well, no, not really. It's no big deal. What you're essentially getting with XF AVC-S is H.264, and XF HEVC-S is H.265. Now, we might have more choices with different resolutions and refresh rates like we see in the R5 Mark II, but what this is simply indicating is that we're getting the new cinema menu system, or way of calling out resolutions and refresh rates that we see in the R5 Mark II, which is more akin to the cinema or industry standards for different types of resolutions and refresh rates. Nothing to be super excited about. And while some specs are calling for R and Super 35, we're also getting Cinema Raw Light. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that Canon Rumors today got a set of leaked specifications from a Weibo account. But this time, it wasn't E8M8888. Otherwise, I would have caught it myself this weekend. Now, this update from today is really a big one. Let's flash it up again. Can you guess which one here is a really big deal? Take a closer look. Now, if you guess Canon Log 2 and Canon Log 3 as being significant, you're right. So why is it significant? Well, very simply. Now, Canon Log 3 you can put on almost any camera, and Canon has. We see it at various different price points. And I think even the Canon EOS R50V that recently was announced also has this. But to get Canon Log 2, you need a certain sensor, and it's usually an expensive full-frame sensor that's capable of, at a minimum, 15 stops of dynamic range, and from what I've read, it requires 16 stops of dynamic range. It's dynamic range as Canon accounts for it, not industry-wide tests. So why is this significant? Canon Log 2 is designed to capture a wider dynamic range, typically 16 stops, which is more than the sensors of the Canon EOS R5, R3, and R6 can effectively utilize. So taking that a step further, if we look at the specs from December, they stated that the R6 Mark III was getting the Canon R3's sensor. So either something changed, or these leaked specifications weren't leaks at all. They were someone's forecast once again, so another red flag. So we can effectively discount these specifications. So in covering leaked specifications, which I've been doing for about 6 long years now, I'm always looking for red flags. It could be translations, it could be different types of combinations of specifications that don't work together. Do you recall those leaked specifications we got for the Canon EOS R5 Mark II on Black Friday of 2022? I found 5 to 6, well, red flags there, and obviously that didn't come to pass, and several others came thereafter it. So you might be wondering, what about these specifications that we got today? Well, it does call for a new sensor, not an updated sensor, but it would have to deliver at least 16 stops of dynamic range. And it would indeed make the Canon EOS R6 Mark III a mini R1 and become, once again, a leader in the segment, taking the crown away from the Nikon Z6 Mark III. I know it seems like a bit of a puzzle. I feel like a DCI or a Detective Chief Inspector or DI Detective Inspector. I get all my TLAs mixed up every now and then. I definitely... So I'm kind of hemming and hawing on this here. I definitely think Canon Log 3. Canon Log 2 is possible, but again, we need a whole new sensor. And it would seem strange that the Canon EOS R6 Mark III would get this brand new sensor and not, well, the R3. And it's interesting that the Canon EOS R1, released in mid-November, didn't get Canon Log 2 either. Don't you find that just a little bit suspect, a little bit interesting? That the R6 Mark III will get a whole new sensor that's stacked, full frame, with 16 plus stops of dynamic range? And if we take one last look at these specifications today, there are a few interesting things. Now, if we take a look at 4K up to 120 frames per second, it does indicate that it's doing DCI 4K and not just 4K UHD. And that 6K oversample 4K, well, it's also both DCI and UHD, which would definitely be hitting above its belt. Now, I'm not saying that it couldn't get a new sensor that supports 16 stops of dynamic range. I just think it's a little bit strange that Canon would debut this new bold sensor in the R6 and not an R3 Mark II, which according to Canon rumors is still a camera that's supposed to be coming out. Now, initially it was supposed to be for 2025, but who knows? Anyway, so what about the date? The rumored date is still for May, but with everything going on, that could get pushed. But if we take a look at a camera registration here for the R6 Mark III, look at the date. It's all the way from October the 14th, 2024. And that's significant because it normally takes anywhere from 1 to 3 months after a camera registration before we had the announcement. And when was the original date planned for the announcement of the Canon EOS R6 Mark III? Yep, it was early January, so that's been delayed. So we're now at about 6 months since the camera registration. So I'm not going to say it's May. All indications are pointing towards either late May or it could get pushed into maybe June or even July. A lot's going on, but there's one thing that, as I've said in previous videos, Canon is a publicly traded company. Well, they're trying to figure out what's going on right now. They can't sit on their hands with their cameras and their lenses and say, okay, we're going to hold off releasing them right now because of everything that's going on. Nope. Like children, you have to set them off into the wild and hope that you raise them well and they can do well. And that's what Canon's going to be doing too. They're confident that they've produced a really solid camera. The R6 Mark III will take back the crown from the Nikon Z6 Mark III. And they hope that when they put it into the wild, it's going to do well. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, the price of this camera, well, the R6 Mark II and the R6 Mark I both released for a price of $24.99. That was pre-tariffs, and if we just add 10% to that, it could increase the price up to as high as $29.99 at the very highest. I don't think it's going to go that high. I think if they do raise the price, it's going to be some 6 to 7% higher. But even again, that's just a guess at this point because we don't know what's happening with all these, quote, negotiations or discussions or talks or whatever else. Things could change at the last minute. And we could get to the end of the 90 days, which I think we've spent 1 month already. And, well, things could go up as well, right? So they could go up, they could go down, or they could be eliminated. We just have to wait and see. And I want to say a big thanks to you for watching to the very end. If you are interested in purchasing the Canon EOS R6 Mark III, go ahead and copy down these smart pre-order links. Now, while they're not going to give you anything right now, as soon as the embargo is lifted on the announcement day, they're going to allow you to see every single option available from Adorama, B&H, and Amazon.com, although Amazon.com doesn't usually do announcement day releases. So it'll show you all kit packages available. And because you've already got it and you've got it bookmarked, it can save you anywhere from 5 to 30 seconds, allowing you to get into the queue a little bit quicker. But there is another reason why you might want to use these, and that's to help support this channel. I don't do any sponsorships. I don't believe in them. I haven't been able to find one that's, how should we say, not irritating or makes me seem like I'm selling out. So by using my affiliate links where I get anywhere from 2 to 6% back, or my smart pre-order links, you quite literally are supporting this channel and helping to keep the lights on. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have yourself a great day, and we'll see you again soon.